So now I'm just going to do a very quick turn over to Dr. Marcella to share with you her presentation.
Great. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone, or good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Who knows where you're dialing in from as well. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited that we get to reconnect, that I get to be a part of this as we celebrate International Women's Day. Today also has a very special meaning for me. So 9 years ago, I arrived in Malaysia, and I moved into this building. So for me, it's the universe kind of coming together and allowing me to reflect and share. So thank you for being a part of that with me. Gosh, after Dato's session, I'm not even sure where to start, and I can't do any of that justice. I think she's got a fantastic story to share with so much eloquence and determination, and I can feel the energy. I can see it from all of you. You guys are all like alert and feeling inspired. And so what I'd like to spend maybe the next 5 to 6, 7 minutes, we'll keep it a little shorter, is looking at sort of, she shared her personal experience and how she sort of developed herself as a leader and also influenced her organization. And I'd like to spend a little more time looking at workplace culture. So kind of the other side of that, right? The organizations that we are a part of, that we can influence, and that hopefully will continue to change as diversity, equity, and inclusion becomes more of a norm. You know, hopefully one day we can stop celebrating International Women's Day because it's just there. Like, we're just there. We're there where we belong, and we can reflect back and sit down and actually celebrate, as opposed to use this as a means to really have to advocate and bring, you know, all that energy to the table. So very briefly, I have 2 images I'd like to show you, because for me, visuals work well. A lot of what we're discussing today, you've heard before, you've experienced, you kind of know it's there, right? And I think as we celebrate International Women's Day, it's good for us to reflect and realize that the why, you know, why do we need women everywhere, including at the top, left, right, center, at the bottom, everywhere? It's more a conversation of how. Right? How are we going to get there? And that's a huge topic. That is not something I can cover in 10 minutes. But I think it's important for us to look at the elements that you mentioned earlier. So diversity is really engaging different perspectives. Yes, we know that. Equity then is, are we providing the right policies and frameworks and kind of underlying structure to allow and embrace and push and thrive for that? And then inclusion is, how are you bringing everyone to the table so they have power, so they have voice, and effectively, so you're creating a culture, right? And culture is not something you can pinpoint, you can't really put numbers on it. It's just, it's kind of that feel, right? Where you feel like you belong. One more, there we go. Is, I think, an image you've probably seen before as well. The difference between diversity and inclusion, right? I think a lot of us are at a point, we see that in Malaysia, we see that globally. We're not far enough along, but I think we can celebrate that there is some diversity. Whether it's gender, I think we need to start talking about other things. You know, race is a big one. We see a lot of that happening in the US. In Malaysia, still can be a sensitive topic. Age, LGBT T++ is something we're struggling with, disabilities, right? So we can go beyond that. But of course, gender is an easy one because it's half the population. Like, we're done being ignored at this point. But bring the diversity to the table, but how can you create that inclusion where everyone that you've brought to the table or to the team has that voice and they're really reaching their full potential, right? And another dimension to maybe consider is diversity is treating you the way I'd like to be treated. And people go, oh, okay. But inclusion really is treating you the way you want to be treated. And that's a fundamental difference. And I think that's where we discuss sort of that move from equality to equity. And that's something I'd like you to keep in mind individually, as an employee, as a mother, as a leader, as whatever. because those things impact how we make day-to-day decisions and how we can be more inclusive or perhaps are not being as inclusive as we think we are. So I'm going to leave you with kind of 3 perhaps suggestions on how to do that. Like I said, the why is there. You guys all know the why. You're here, right? But how can we do that? It's not a comprehensive review. This is not a full sort of framework on how you can do it, but maybe 3 things based on my own experience from the last few years that you could effectively implement immediately. I'm not saying this is something you have to do, but something on that list may resonate or may get you to think of other things that you can do as an individual, as an employee, as a leader, and hopefully as key influencers within your organization. Okay? So a few ideas out there. What can you do? As an individual, I think it's very important for us to be aware of our own biases and limitations. That's not self-criticism, it's a self-awareness. You then choose, if you realize you have a bias or you have a limitation, you then choose, are you going to try and fight that, or is that just a battle you're not going to pick and you're going to focus your energy elsewhere? Like, we have to be aware that it's very okay to have biases, but if you're trying to change something, are you going to try and change those biases? Yeah? The second point is speak up for yourself. I have to put that in there, but I really struggle with that, right? We do that daily. It takes so much energy. It's exhausting. But I encourage you to speak up for others. It's something we're a bit more comfortable doing, and it's something that can have also a much larger impact. So if you can see that something happened or someone described, I had a meeting 2 days ago and someone's like, oh, so-and-so is, I said, she's really great, I think we should pull her in. They're like, yeah, it was a gentleman, he's like, yeah, she's great, she's really aggressive. And I was like, sorry, can we not use that word? And he didn't realize, but for me it was a big thing, right? I'm thinking, it's a senior gentleman, do I say something, do I not? But it was really sort of eating at me. And I was like, actually, could we not use aggressive? You know, could we just say she's determined or she's just amazing? You know, a more generic descriptor. And he goes, oh yeah, I didn't mean that. And we moved on, right? So you can speak up for others, and sometimes we find that more comfortable than speaking up for ourselves. There's, of course, the whole discussion around sexual harassment and speaking up. That's a whole other discussion. But I think fundamentally, if we can speak up for each other, we can create that shift. And that's the same for the gentleman in the room, or people that, you know, identify differently as well. And then another thing I'd like you to ask yourself is, are you supporting as many women as men? And we as women and men have the same kind of biases sometimes. If you're having a conversation, if you're inviting someone for lunch, if you're giving someone extra attention because through mentoring, through a feedback session, through liking LinkedIn posts, like it's as simple as that. Can you reflect and just kind of figure out, are you supporting the women in your environment as much as you are the men? And that is something we can all do starting immediately. And those are very small shifts that don't take much time but would create a huge difference. Right? Even just LinkedIn, I see that. Like, some of my male friends post things and there's 200-300 likes, and the women post something that's just as fantastic and it's like 50 or 60, but subconsciously you start judging people based on these things. So we can all positively contribute. And then for organizations, again, it's not a comprehensive list, but just to get you guys maybe thinking and inspired. For organizations, the fundamental here is these diversity, equity, and inclusion are values, right? This is not a one-off event. If your organization says, yes, we value women, we have International Women's Day, all of you are thinking, well, that's not enough, right? No, of course it's not enough. It's important. It's symbolic, but it's certainly not enough. So DEI needs to be infused at everything in your organization, which really brings me to 3 points. One, don't put the responsibility of DEI on the woman or the minority. We see that a lot, right? Oh, perfect example. Ministry of Women, it's always a female, right? I would maybe struggle if it was a male, to be honest, my own biases, but it's kind of like, yeah, but women can be in oil and gas. They can be doing other things, but don't put that responsibility just on the woman, right? You need just as many men and women to be spearheading DEI initiatives. Then, if you're serious, allocate a budget. Allocate a serious budget. The assumption is women will do this on the side. They will advocate for themselves on the side. I just had a chat. I have one of my favorite clients, oil and gas, regional, and we rolled out a great program, and then I found out that that wasn't reflected, so my contact, it wasn't reflected in her performance review. And I was like, well, did you get compensated for it? She's like, no. I'm like, what? And obviously this company is really big. They did a great job as a fantastic program, but they kind of assumed she would do this pro bono in addition to all of her other, strategy work that she's doing, right? So if you're serious as a company, put a serious budget to that. Companies go, yeah, I have DEI, it's in my annual report. I'm like, you don't have a chief DEI officer. You don't even have a DEI officer or executive, right? And that's a big conversation. We're seeing that happen in ESG. So it will, and it needs to happen with DEI as well. And then really the last point, also a very, very easy, it's so small, but make sure there is representation, also visually. It's really important for people to see that they are being represented. No more panels, right? Panels that are just men. Or like you get these famous public listing offerings, right? They're on the stock exchange, and it's like 20 men in black suits. You can't tell me there weren't a bunch of women that supported that public offering listing, right? I mean, we know that that's just not true. And those are small things as well. If you're in marketing or PR, make sure that you have that they're represented, because it's not a merit question. You all know that lots of women were part of that effort. But sometimes we just don't realize. It's easy to say, oh, well, we just want the CEOs. Well, if you just get the CEOs, you're going to get all men, because that's kind of the reality. But that doesn't mean you can't also get head of department and whoever who was actually driving that initiative, right? So something for all of us to consider. I'm really worried I've gone way over time. But these are, and so my only question to you now, for just a minute, you can pull out your phones, or if you've got a piece of paper, can you write down one thing that you can do to be more inclusive? I write something down every day. Doesn't mean I always get to it, but I think it's important just to remember that that's something we are empowered to do and should be doing. Okay. With that, thank you so much. I love the energy I'm getting. I really appreciate you guys supporting me in my journey as well, and it's been a delight being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that. I, as always, have taken away a couple of points from her presentation. One of the things that really stood out for me is she said, choose to challenge the biases, and if you decide to walk away, walk away. Now, the other thing to that is, when you walk away, you have to not feel like a victim. You have to be very conscious that that's a decision you've made and you're willing to sacrifice that. So that goes hand in hand. A lot of people walk away from something feeling, I'm the victim. Don't do that. Be conscious about it, yeah? The other thing is about speaking up. And I wanted to share this at the panel, but well, I'm going to do it now. There was a survey done by A.T. Watson's on women all over the world. There were about 20 countries that participated. And they actually wanted to know how confident women are. So women in the range of 20 to 29, 50% of them don't feel confident. And women who are above 29 start to begin to have confidence. So you can actually see, you know, when the woman has been in the workforce or has gone through a lot of experiences, she then knows what works and what doesn't, and therefore builds the confidence. But why I'm putting it out there is speaking up is a big part of, you know, just doing away with some of the biases that are out there. Because people may not be aware of the value that you bring to the table, the strengths that you have, unless you speak up. So I'm going to share something with you. In my last career, I actually had to present to the, you know, a board that consists of vice presidents and presidents on us actually shifting from a huge business model change. And we had something called a Kaizen workshop for 5 days. And after we finished that, we had to present whatever that came out from the Kaizen to this board. So I was told at the 4th day, or in the evening, that you're going to now present tomorrow to this board, which consists of vice presidents and presidents. Believe me, when I walked out of that room that evening, I mean, I don't know how to say this politely, but if somebody had a camera on my legs, I was like shivering till everybody could actually see it, yeah? So I was just all over the place. I was so nervous, I was worried, what am I going to say? You know, how do I speak up? I mean, I knew the data, but these are people who have been in the industry. I mean, you don't get to be VP or president, you know, for no, you know, reason. So what happened was I actually called my mentor, and he was a Dutch gentleman, very, very learned, very wise. He was like my Yoda, you know, kind of thing. So he told me, he said, you know what, Suganti? You know who is the person who's the enemy here? It's yourself. You're sitting down and saying how you're going to go wrong in this presentation. None of them know the data like you. You've been working on this for 4 days. What can be the worst thing that happens? If you fail, so you fail. So what? You've learned. You've experienced what presidents think. You have experienced why vice presidents think. And you know what? If you don't know, just say you don't know and you'll get back. And that's okay. Not everybody who comes into a discussion has all the answers. But you have to come out authentic. And that's how you build your credibility. So I wanted to share my 2 cents with that. And last but not least, do you do the same that you do for others? You know, like, you know, she rightfully pointed out, when you support, let's say a LinkedIn post, a gentleman has post as opposed to, you know, your female parties. Now, I really think women can uplift women. We have to see more and more role models. We have to be proud of each other. We have to continue to harness our strengths. So please do that. Please walk away. If you've done one, you know, written out one action, maybe that's one that you could please, you know, put out there as priority. Yeah? Okay, so with that, I'm going to start with the panel. I know I probably have only about 20 minutes now, but I wanted to do something like a rapid fire. If those of you who have follow Karan Johar, you know, he does this rapid fire kind of questions. However, I'm no Karan Johar, so I decided just go with plain old questions. Okay, so Marcella, you actually alluded to this already in terms of how you feel about IWD, yeah? But IWD as a celebration has always been around to kind of make it visible of the achievements that women have had in the social, economic, political, cultural standpoint. However, there's a lot of skepticism on this celebration as well. A lot of people feel, oh, it's just a bunch of women hyping about women, and it serves no purpose. So here's me asking you, what does IWD mean for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I also go through my phases, right? Because we're always kind of advocating for ourselves, and it'd be nice just to sit back and be like, can we actually just celebrate how far we've come? But I think it's important. It's really important that we keep celebrating that day. I work with some of my clients to celebrate International Men's Day, which is on the 19th of November, to thank them for supporting women, you know? So there's other ways that we can continue that. But I think until we reach equity, until we, certainly, and I'm talking specifically in the corporate setting, right? Until we see just as many women at leadership wherever in the organization. And until we see a room like this, where there's just as many men that are here to support and to celebrate, it is something we need to keep doing.
I so second that. Yeah, like I said when I started, a few very, very brave men joined us today. So thank you again. All right. So the next question: what does embracing equity mean to you at home, at work, and in the society?
Yeah, that's a tough one. So I actually, if I could get the last slide from my presentation, I have a visual. I think it kind of defines equality and equity, and it also gives you a sense of why it's so important. And you can extrapolate this to your personal life, your professional life, and society at large. Equality is where you kind of lift everyone up, or equality is where you're giving the same kind of support, perhaps, if that's, to everyone, which is fine, but you see that some people still don't reach above the fence. Another image you might know is where they're picking apples. So you find that the taller one can just pick more apples, and sort of the shorter one here still can't reach, although they've gotten that support. Equity is different, where if the outcome is that you need to be able to look over the fence, or you need to be able to pick that apple, you have to acknowledge that people are different and need different support. That doesn't mean they are weaker or stronger or need more empowerment or whatever, but simply if your outcome is to provide the same opportunities, and again, same opportunities is also a hard one, if you want people to reach their full potential, right? We're not saying everyone needs to work or everyone needs to become a CEO, right? As a society, we need people that will raise children, that will lead Fortune 500 companies, that will worry about clean water supplies, right? But if our outcome is to progress as a society, and I'm talking about globally, it's not even about small geographies anymore, we need to provide opportunities where everyone can reach that potential. And that's what equity means to me, and this is an image that I'm sure you've all seen before. And that works at the personal level, at the, within work, as well as society at large.
I think what really stood out for me is, when you put the lens on reaching your full potential, I think that's critical for us to know. It's not about challenging something just for the sake of challenging. It's about enabling people to have and to reach their full talent. A question for the crowd, yeah? I'm sure many of you, when work is done, so whatever time it is, 6 p.m., 5 p.m., when you walk out of the physical door or your virtual office, you just switch off. So I need to see a show of hands of how many of you can just switch off of work when you walk out of the door. I'm sure many of you.
For the virtual audience, we have one hand, two hands.
Yes. So yeah, we have two hands that went up, and I'm not surprised. Yeah, and the reason why I put that out is, so I'm going to share with you what a study. It was done by Deloitte. It's called Women at Work in 2022, and what it says is only 45% of women rated their ability to switch off from work as good or extremely good. 45%. 34% rated it as poor or extremely poor. And why were they not able to switch off? Was because they felt that their careers could be actually in jeopardy. Yeah, so what is the impact of that? They want to leave the workforce, or they want to take a career break. What a loss of talent and good input that we could have. So the question is, what would you tell or advise women who are going through this?
That's a tough one. I think we've seen that exacerbated with COVID, right? There's a lot of studies that show more women have dropped out of the workforce. The burden at home has been that much bigger. People said, oh, let's all go back to work, but then daycares weren't open. And it's like, okay, that pre-COVID, that there was a system, it worked, and suddenly it was gone. I actually think it's partly there's the gender component, but I'd like to maybe take gender out of the equation. Because I think, although the two hands that we saw happen to be men, that's not particularly, we can't do any statistics on that, but I think this impacts men as well as women. I'm not saying as much, I don't know, but what we are seeing is there is a lot more emphasis on work-life balance, and that's kind of what I'm assuming some of this data is trying to get at. And so I think that's also a really interesting approach to taking gender out of the equation, right? So how are we creating a work environment that is conducive for anyone? And I'd add into that the generational differences, right? There are the talent that's going to be paying our pension funds in 20, 30, 50 years. They're also they're not just looking for monetary benefits, but also work-life balance, flexi work, remote work, whatever it might be. So yes, I think there are definitely studies that show the burden has been higher for women. Now, post-COVID, we need to see whether that readjusts. The environment is still set up in a way that it's created by and for men, and so there are we need to look at how we set that up so that when there are pressures, there's stress, there's anxiety, or there is that tendency to say, I can't do anymore, what are we doing to support women so that maybe they don't come to that decision? Like, there's ways to mediate that as well.
Thank you so much for that. And I think the thing that I take away from this is it's about building an environment or developing an work environment that's conducive for all. It's not a gender-specific, agenda that you have to have. Now, one of the things that actually, I see, and also in terms of if you look at the human resource strategies that are out there, more and more younger professionals coming into the workforce want to have a work-life balance as part of what's being offered. They want to have or know what is the purpose of your organization. How are you actually contributing to the SDGs goals? Yeah. So it's an important thing even for looking at people strategy when you're doing your planning. And what really amazes me is when I used to go for interviews many years ago, it was about tell me what you want me to do and I will do it. Now we have a lot of younger professionals that come in and say, by the way, what do you offer in terms of flexibility? Can I work from home? What is your purpose? How do you manage green agendas? So they have truly a different perspective of life, and we have to change fast in order to attract and retain them in our organizations. Okay, so let me move on to one other question, which is, okay, so this is for our gentlemen. How can women focus on, I've got this. So what would you like to see men do more in support of embracing equity?
Tough one. So I think, and this is based on my own experience, and I encourage you all to think of that, because I do think when we have these conversations that our spouses, our best friends, our bosses are actually very open to hearing and understanding. And I think sometimes we also need to say, hey, can we sit down, and is there something you can do for me, right? Maybe I can highlight three things. One, listen, right? I know sometimes women chat a bit more, it takes a bit longer to get to the point, but chances are that's because they're feeling nervous or they're not confident or they haven't had the practice. So just listen. And listen, not to respond, right? There's been a lot of that going viral. And also don't interrupt. And mansplaining. Most of us know, we've all been recipients of mansplaining. Try to at least be aware, even if your tendency is to do that, because I'm quick to chat and interrupt, and of course as a woman I don't get told I mansplain, but it's effectively sometimes the same thing. So at least be aware of it. Even if that's a battle you can't fight right now, be aware that you do that, and then be open to that feedback, right? So listen to listen and to support, not because you think you have a better idea right off the bat. The second one is empathize, and I think that's a very, very hard one. What we as women face daily is something men may never understand. It is so different, right? We were talking about something, I can list at least 5, 6 things that have happened to me this week that for us are normal, but if I told my dad that, or my boss, or whatever, they would just be like, huh? You know, it's just not something they face. A perfect example, I go running in KLCC Park, right? And especially a year or 2 years ago, this big movement around sexual harassment. You know, I'm at the crosswalk, I'm pumped, I made it out of bed, I'm excited, I'm ready, I ate pasta last night, like I'm gonna run 10K. And as I cross the road, I'm in yoga attire, I can pretty much see that there's a bunch of men walking my way I feel like they're undressing me with their eyes, right? And we've all had these experiences. But the guy next to me who's gonna go running with me has no idea that I just went through that, right? So then I'm like, I end up running half of that, and he's like, what's wrong? You're well trained. I'm like, but that just, for me, that was such a hard experience that completely changes and completely impacts my productivity, right? And we all face that daily, but I think the guys don't know that, not because they don't want to, but we do need to open, someone mentioned, I think in your opening remarks, how can we have open dialogues to raise awareness and to share? Because we can never put a man in the same situation as us, and that's also not the point. We don't want to become like men, and we don't want men to become like us. But if the men can try and empathize, try and understand, I think it would open up a whole new world. And then it's a big thing changing the people you work with, right? If suddenly the room you walk into is more women, or you're told that you need to advocate for something that you may not understand or may not fully believe in, whatever, that's okay. But it's a big unknown, and that is humbling. So just be humbled. We're all facing a new norm, whether that's post-COVID, whether that means having more women, whether that means talking about, hey, I'm on my period today, I don't want to go for lunch. You know, those are things we don't hear. Should we be hearing those things? It's a completely new world. It's scary for all of us. I think we're facing that. So it's okay. We can be humbled and approach that together.
Thank you for that. I think the first point that you spoke about, where listen to really want to listen, that's something I can speak to myself too. I'm always, figuring out some intelligent response, yeah. But I could take a break. All right, so we are at the last 5 minutes. I would like to ask the audience if you have any questions. Would anybody want to? Yes, please. Could I have a mic given to her?
Thank you. Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Linda. It's very loud. And I'm with a company called LA Partners. LA Partners is my company, and I'm in the talent recruitment space. I'm a headhunter. So it's very interesting to hear that companies should hire a DEI representative. I've not seen this hire in Malaysia. You've been consulting with oil and gas companies. Do they have this on the agenda to hire DEI specialist or representative?
So I'm certainly not an HR expert. We have seen that trend a lot in the US, right? Because of sort of all kinds of pressures, often externally from an organization. Is that something I'm seeing here? I haven't heard of it. Doesn't mean it's not there. You know, I also live in my own little bubble. What I would say though, because of this push for ESG, we are seeing companies actually put a budget, put KPIs or key development indicators to it. And so I'm very hopeful that we can see that with DEI. And also that DEI doesn't just get lumped under ESG. Correct. You know, it depends on the company and it depends on the sincerity. Have I really seen it? Not yet. Will it come? I think so. Is it necessary? So. Yes, I hope so.
Thank you.
And just to add on to that, I mean, I think I've been fortunate because in the companies that I've worked in, DEI was a huge thing. In something in 2005, we already had a whole functional tower that actually worked on DEI. And what that really does is, just like if, when data is huge today, and you have chief data officers, why do we actually appoint someone for that? We really appoint someone for that so they can drive the agenda as seriously as everything else that you're doing. It's not seen as just a nice to have, as opposed to this is a KPI or a goal that our organization stands for. So if you're making the decision of whether you need to have somebody head that department, it's really also going back to the drawing board and understanding if that agenda is serious enough for your business model and for the business transformation that you need. Yeah? So I hope that helps. And anybody else before we close? Thank you so much. Anybody from the online audience who have a question?
Dr. Datin Professor Dr. Kwek Ai Hua has asked, what strategy do you recommend for women in STEM tertiary education and professions in Malaysia?
Strategy, okay, that's a big question. I think a really good question. I'm not sure what angle, perhaps, she's asking for. I'm STEM, so I did biochemistry, I did a PhD in neuroscience, and given sort of the environment, now reflecting back, realized I left it because the environment was not particularly inclusive. And we see that in most places, and certainly academia also. My advice is try and stick it out. Purely from an economic perspective, we need more women in STEM. We want more Dato Hazimas who really are trailblazing and creating change and thriving. But of course, you make your own, obviously make your own decisions. A few things. One, get some mentorship. Get some mentorship from men and women. Get some sponsorship. Find people that really believe in what you do and what you're good at, because they will help you, right? An opportunity will come along because they know you, they see the opportunity and kind of go, this is just a great fit. I think Dato Hazima is maybe better fit to answer that question, but her focus was know your content. Know your content, understand the relationships, build that support network, and then, like she said, do what you love and put the hard work in. And that's for anyone, whether that's STEM or not. But STEM does have sort of those additional sort of perhaps barriers and challenges.
Here's another question. Thank you very much for that, Dr. Marcella. Now, I'd just like to point out, this is from Khalijah Bakar. I wanted to get advice if a lady gets sabotaged by a man just because we stand up and fight for women's rights. What kind of strategy can we do to overcome that situation?
Wow. Any thoughts?
Actually, I think a lot of this is an individual decision. You know, when you're in challenging situations, it's about whether you can continue to stand up, continue to want to fight a battle that means something to you. So, you know, I think Peter Drucker said this really well, right? You know what is what is in control inside and outside, right? There are some things that you can just bang your head on the wall and nothing is going to ever happen. Now you've got to decide whether it's worth the fight for you to go at that, or do you want to move into something and work around the situation? So there isn't an easy answer to this. In my experiences, is about me sticking it out. And even if I feel like a total sore thumb in an environment, I have in some cases stood it out because I want to make a difference. So I think it's about an individual decision that you have to do. And you know what, when you're actually working in an organization, I think many women, we are head down and into work, which is something that we can learn from the men, is about great networking opportunities. You need to know who's who. And I'm not saying this in a snide way, or I want you to think about it as something that is a must. If you want to grow in a company, you need to know the who's who. How does the network work? Who is influencing what strategies? How do I put my ideas forward? Who do I put my ideas forward? She spoke about sponsors. These are critical roles. You must have a sponsor. You must have a mentor who can teach you the ropes. So I hope, those are just tips from our experience. And the journey is, I can assure her that the journey is going to be tough. But stick it out, like Marcella rightfully pointed out.
Yeah, I might add to that. Figure out what you're still getting out of that situation, right? We all have bad situations. So either you choose to fight it because you're going to grow from that fight, or you choose to, for me, I'm not known to be patient. So when these things come up, I'm like, okay, maybe I should be a bit more empathetic and a bit more patient, not for this guy, but because it will benefit me. But the other thing is, we've seen it with some of the lady prime ministers. If that's not a place for you, you can move on. There are other opportunities. It is very, very simple. There are other opportunities where if that is not a wall you want to be breaking down or a fight you want to pick, there are other opportunities that perhaps are more conducive to you.
All right, so that's a wrap now. I'd like to thank you for being on the panel and for being so candid and so generous with your sharings. Thank you for participating and hearing us out. We'll just do a quick close on this, and obviously we would like to appreciate you. So I'll pass it to Rishi and.